their own perspectives. Conveying lessons from human experience represents man's greatest challenge. That is my challenge. I ask that you listen with a bit of humility, recognize there may be some things that you need to do different. You guys aren't going to go to jail, but there could be some things in your life that hold you back from progressing, from growing. Stubbornness and arrogance. Those were my two biggest downfalls in business. It led me to fraud, distorted my view of the world. So a little bit of humility and open to recognize there may be a different way to do things, and I ask that you listen. So why did I go to jail? That's the question that I'm asked the most. When I run into somebody and they find out I went to prison, the first question is why? Why did you go to jail? I went to jail as a result of a meeting that I engaged in with a client of mine. My client ran a hedge fund. What is a hedge fund? It is a product where it's exactly what Bernie Madoff did. Bernie Madoff raised money from investors, and once he raised that money, he had to house that money at a certain brokerage firm. I was the custodian. My client raised money from investors, and he then deposited that money with me at Bear Stearns and then UBS. And one of his major investors in the hedge fund, a 90-year-old rabbi, and I agreed to attend this meeting. Knowing what I knew about that hedge fund, I never should have attended, but I did. And at this meeting, it was my client, the 90-year-old rabbi, and his 3 advisors. We sit down. I think it's going to be a nice, comfortable meeting. The advisor directs a question directly at me. Justin, do you think a 90-year-old rabbi should have $3 million in a basket of growth stocks? And at that moment, I felt like the proverbial deer that had been unexpectedly caught in the headlights. I didn't know what to say. And millions of things were running through my mind. Of course, I now know what the right thing to do would have been, which is address the troubling discrepancy. I knew as of the morning of that meeting, my client had less than $1 million in his hedge fund. So clearly, if the rabbi's advisors thought that he had $3 million, my client was making misrepresentations. But I didn't get up and I didn't address the discrepancy. I didn't get up and leave and say, I can't participate in this meeting. Instead, I tried to duck the question. I said, well, I'm not really responsible for managing the account. My client manages the money. I simply execute the trades. What you guys do is your business. I'm just here to tell you a little bit about UBS. They said, look, Justin, you're a bright guy. You're a vice president at UBS. Come on. Should a 90-year-old rabbi have $3 million in stocks? Well, I tried to duck the question, and I said, well, no, a 90-year-old guy should probably have a little bit more money invested in bonds, a little more conservative. And they said, Justin, we agree. We agree. Will you help us allocate this $3 million? And then everything was running through my mind at that time. What do I do? Now, I knew that my client had already done $100,000 a month, $100,000 in commissions that month. I knew he had done it the previous 8 months. And I knew if the account stayed alive, he would do it the next 8 months. I didn't want the commissions to stop. At that point in my career, I had grown so addicted to the money, I wanted to make more, not less. I figured if the account was shut down, my income was going to go down huge. I relied upon my client for so much business. And I knew if I did that, things were going to go bad for me. I didn't think about the client. I didn't put myself in the advisor's shoes or the rabbi's shoes thinking, wow, 90-year-old rabbi thinks he has $3 million when he really has nothing. It was about me. I didn't want to suffer and I didn't want to make less. Because as you get older and as you make more, you expect more. And I was very much a part of that. So I agreed to reallocate the $3 million. And after the meeting was over, I yelled at my client. I said, what have you done to me? Why did you put me in this meeting? What is wrong with you? And he said, look, I can make it back. Exactly what Bernie Madoff told himself when he started his fraud 17 or 18 years ago. And he took that initial money and he couldn't pay it back, and then he did with somebody else's money. It starts out small. A little payback here, a little payback there. Before you know it, it grows to be so huge you are in too deep, it is too late to go back. It's just a matter of time before the cards come crashing down. And in the back of my mind, I knew it was a matter of time before the cards came crashing down with my client. But I agreed. I said, you know what, you can make it back. We don't want this guy to realize he's lost all his money along with your other investors. Fine, let's make it back. And he said, thank you, I can make it back. Well, I rationalized that I was looking out for the investors. But in truth, I wanted the gravy train of commissions to continue. That meeting was fraud. It's securities fraud. I engaged in a meeting where I told somebody they had money that did not exist. And that meeting is ultimately what led me to prison. And it wasn't until I went to prison that I actually said to myself, how could I let that happen? It doesn't make any sense. Why would I walk into that meeting and say that I was 27 years old, I had $1 million, I had a dog, I had a fiance, I had parents that were nothing but proud of me? I had a good name, an honest name, and people respected me. And when they heard my name, they would say, "He's a good kid, that Justin. He's a good kid." But now I'm serving time in prison. And while in prison, seeking refuge in a prison's quiet room, away from all the chaos of prison, I had an opportunity to sit back and reflect on my life and the decisions. And then a friend of mine who'd been in jail for more than 22 years gave me a philosophy book. And I opened up to page 71 and I came across the German philosopher Rousseau, who wrote about the social contract theory, outlining each citizen's responsibility with one another. And having cheated others, I knew I broke the law. And I came across the trial of Socrates, and how rather than escaping, he stood up and drank the poison and died, because he would rather die than not be able to teach and preach within his school. Not to teach, he'd rather die. That's integrity, that's honesty, standing up for what you believe, no shortcuts.